Welcome back. Over here, Jeff to my left, or technically my right, I guess, depending how you look at it. He and I met, I don't know, what was it, like 4 months ago at Master Track? It
Yes,
seems like
yes.
yesterday. It was great. I think we have a couple people from Master Track here. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, it is a 1 week program in Los Angeles by Laura Escudé, who was the first Ableton certified trainer in the world. She's brilliant. She's worked with like Kanye West, Ariana Grande, Lady Gaga. Like she's done like live playback Ableton tours for so many people. It's insane. And she runs this master track, and she had Jeff speaking as one of the keynote presenters for our class, and he focused on how to use Clyphx for live performance, and he absolutely killed it. And I was like, this dude is amazing. I honestly dabbled a little bit in Clyphx before that presentation, and then like you completely sold me on it. And I like I've made a couple of Clyphx tutorial videos on how to sample hardware, and like it's been fantastic. But Jeff also has his own website, jeffcaylor.com. Go check that out. We'll shout out more about that at the end of the webinar. Yeah, Jeff, dude, thanks for coming out, man. I'm stoked.
Thanks, Dan. I'm so happy to be here. So glad to be joining you guys. I'm actually in Hong Kong at the moment. It's 7:03 a.m. here, local time. Protests have subsided for the week right now, but yeah, I'm super happy to be here with you guys and stoked to see some folks, some familiar faces here in the chat. So Philip, and yeah, so as Dan mentioned, we met in Los Angeles at Master Track this year, and I actually realized like a year ago, a little over a year ago, I should say, that a big part of my life has been focused on playback engineering. I didn't realize that that's what you called it. I didn't know that was the technical word for it, but a couple years ago, I found Laura Escudé and her team of electronic creatives online on a Reddit post, actually, and I was like, oh, actually, this is what I do every day, every week, but I didn't realize that it was playback engineering. I didn't realize there was a whole kind of cottage industry growing up around it. And so kind of since that time, or even before that time, I guess, this has really been my world, and figuring out ways to, I guess, tell stories using technology. And a lot of people want to say, hey, if you're using a computer, it's not real music or whatever. And I think that's kind of becoming an old way of thinking. And most people who perform music in larger venues, at least, are using a computer somehow on stage, or they're at least using a click track, or using some way to kind of keep the band together, to kind of keep, unless you're total session cats, to kind of keep the band sounding great and sounding like you might on a recording that people are used to listening to. And sometimes that involves using auto-tune. Sometimes that involves using quantized backing tracks. Sometimes it involves kind of quantizing yourself in real time and doing different things that just help you communicate your art in a way that is palatable to the crowd, in a way that more than anything expresses the message that you want to share. And so I've used a lot of different things over the years to do that. And Clyphx is one of the tools that I want to kind of talk about today. I'll share some examples and walk you through the basics, but then we'll get to some pretty advanced stuff pretty quick, I think. So
yeah, I'm excited about that.
Cool.
Go ahead and share your screen, Jeff, if you want to, and we can see the beautiful Ableton Live on your desktop.
So let me just, I'm going to open my Clyphx ideas template first, but while we're doing that, let me come back and just talk to you guys a little bit about history here. So I have kind of been into pushing the boundaries with technology and figuring out how to make the most of what I can do in a live setting. I love doing that, but I also realize that at some point, as most people do when they're using a computer on stage, is that you can get really focused on the screen. You can get really focused on the buttons and kind of lose track of the room and the people that are coming there to see you make music. And so what I like to say is I like to use the computer to enhance the performance, help tell the story, but I don't want to let that be a distraction from engaging with the crowd in the room. So So I've kind of created ways that can help me maximize my engagement, my rapport with the room, but also help me kind of make the music that I want and be an authentic artist on the stage. And so Clyphx is one of the ways that can do that. I'm going to open up my preferences here. And the way you install Clyphx is fairly simple. If you've used any kind of controller script in Ableton, which just means if I've used a keyboard that has a transport, play, stop, forward, backward. If you've used a controller script and you know how to do that in Ableton, you basically just drop a text file into a folder and a directory on your computer, and then you can select here your control surface. And so Clyphx actually is it's a control surface. It's sort of like a MIDI interface for your brain. And so you have to select Clyphx here. Clyphx and Clyphx Pro, they kind of parted ways, I should say, maybe a year ago. So in January of 2018, they came out with Clyphx Pro. The stuff that I'm going to be sharing today, I would say most of this works with Clyphx, but it's no longer in development. As of January 2018, they stopped developing. And I will say that Stray, the guy that came up with Clyphx, is quite a genius, and he's very active in developing the software, and he's also very attentive to user feedback. And so there's some things, even stuff that I'm going to share today, that I was like, hey, I wish it could do this. I wish you could make this feature something in Clyphx, and like the next Monday, they were releasing a version of it. Or he would just email back and say, hey, here's a patch that can do what you need. I'll add this to the next revision. And so awesome feedback and awesome customer service from Stray, who kind of created it, and now it's kind of distributed by Isotonic Studios, which they also make some amazing kind of add-on hacks for Ableton and the push as well. So anyway, install Clyphx or Clyphx Pro as a control surface. I'm going to be using Clyphx Pro. It's like $40, I think. Kind of ranges around 40 to 50 bucks. I'm not sure what it is currently. But then once you drop it in, there's some simple things you need to know to use Clyphx. And this is kind of why people don't use Clyphx, because it seems complicated, it seems overwhelming, it seems like programming. But really, once you get a handle on some of the simple things and some of the ways you can use Clyphx, it's quite simple, quite straightforward. So I have a template here, and I'm going to increase the zoom. Nice. That'll get us going here. Okay, so basically, Clyphx consists of two things. An identifier, which is what's in the brackets here. Right now, this says Metro, and Metro is the identifier here. And then you've got your action, which is the second half of this. And this is just what I've named the clip here. You could name this metronome, and it's the same. It doesn't matter what you name it, actually. It just needs to have open bracket, closed bracket, and it could just be a space or nothing in between there. And then you have your action. And the action is actually, this is one of those things where if you don't read the manual, you're going to have a really hard go of it. And I know a lot of Clyphx actions by memory because I use them over and over and over again. But it is like programming in that if you don't get the action exactly right, then you're going to be in a world of hurt trying to figure out why your action isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing. And so sometimes it has to be the right capitalization. Sometimes it has to be the right spaces before and after. Sometimes there needs to be quotation marks. And so if you're not paying attention to how the manual says to use your actions, then that could be a problem. So, and let me just say before we move on to seeing an action and work in action, we have a few ways to hack things or to fire actions in Clyphx. One is using the our renaming of a clip. One is using a locator name. You can rename the locator, and you can see this does the exact same as this. Stop, set, stop. set, stop, stop. It's just the identifier has a different name here. But we can also trigger these through MIDI notes, and you can set up, someone was asking about X controls. So I can actually set up a MIDI note on a MIDI channel at a MIDI velocity that will trigger this Clyphx action. And that's just, they call that X control. This is called an X clip. These are called X locators, I think. And then you can have actions that trigger right when you open up Ableton for the first, like whenever you open up a new session, it will launch a Clyphx action. So there are a few ways to do it. I feel like I'm missing one, but those are the main ones that I use. I'm going to look at the chat real quick to see if anybody is asking questions. Okay, we're good. Okay, so
yeah, we'll hit the questions at the very end. That
okay,
way
awesome.
Yeah.
I'll keep it rolling here, especially people who are viewing after the fact too. So we don't need any identifier there. This is the third one the fourth one I want to show you here is the select action, and this is kind of showing you that I can assign these actions to specific tracks, and I can do that through just the number of tracks from the edge here. So this is track 3. And you can see here, I've got number 3 is the first part of the action. Then I've got a space, and I've got a slash, and I've got a space, and then I've got the letters SEL. And it doesn't have to be on caps in this one. It can be lowercase SEL. But what happens when I launch this clip is it's going to put track 3 in focus. That's all it's going to do. So this is super useful if you are if you use push or use different controllers in your set, and you need your controller to be selecting, MIDI track 34 at right when you start the song. You don't want to be going and scrolling in your set. Where's MIDI track 34 so I can select that? This is a great way to have Ableton instantly select that. For push, I find that it's easier to go in and perform in the recorded, kind of the record mode. And then if you're switching to another track, you can record that track, and rather than using like input changes and things like that. And so I use this all the time when I'm performing with push.
Now, quick question, Jeff.
Yes, sir.
I know we're saving questions for the end, but I'm cheating.
Okay.
So whatever scene that is on, it will automatically jump to the clip on track 3 for that scene, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So this can be, like I said, if it's a locator name here. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I'll be performing an arrangement view, and just you can kind of see here, 3 audio is going to get selected as I'm playing, even though right now MIDI track 1 is selected as soon as I pass this playhead. So it automatically jumps down here and selects this track.
Gotcha.
And again, for looping audio or something where you kind of need that track to be in focus, this is a great tool. And you can flip back and forth. You can select arrangement view or session view. You can tell it to look at arrangement view or look at session view now. And so you can do a lot of things with just the optics of Ableton, what I'm looking at, what's in focus, that kind of thing. So it's super useful that way too. Let me say in arrangement view, this is something I didn't talk about, but this is designed so that as the playhead passes the locator, it launches that instruction. It works 90% of the time when you just launch from the locator, it'll put it in selection. But Stray and other folks, the folks at Isotonic, they'll say really best practice is to have the playhead pass over. So if you want to use a Clyphx Clyphx action X locator in arrangement view, then best practice is to start your song from here and let it pass over whatever you're wanting to do. So just a little sidebar as we're kind of going through here. I'm thinking of things. So you can see this next one is just an example, exactly the same as the previous example, except it's going to, instead of looking for the third track, it's going to look for a track that's labeled vocal. And this is something I think is unique to Clyphx Pro. using the quotation marks if you want to target a track or a scene, but you need to make sure it's labeled the exact same way. So this has a caps in the V here. I have to have a capital V here as well. So all this is going to do is toggle the mute button here on vocal on the channel that's labeled vocal, and you can see that work here. As I push it, you'll see it change back and forth. And this is again what you're looking at as I'm pushing this button. So this is useful. I'm sure you guys are performers or producers. You can kind of figure out where this is useful. And I use Clyphx as a performer mostly. It's super useful for me to be able to trigger things. And honestly, I use it mostly when I don't want to be thinking about if there's something and I'm in a set and I'm thinking, oh man, I might forget that. Or in rehearsal, I forgot to set this knob or to change this thing or to reset my things after I tweaked the heck out of this, you know, the little filter during the first song. Now the filter's all screwed up for the fourth song. So those little things that I might be in a set and go, oh, I might forget that. I'll use Clyphx to just to do it automatically, to be my little robo assistant for performing, and it'll help kind of reset things or set up things that I'm about to perform with. So let me move ahead to the next command or the next action. This is kind of a special one. It says lseek, and this stands for loop sequence. And so basically, we've got a couple things happen. We've got the open close brackets, and I can rename this so you can see what's happening. And basically that means that every time this clip, which is in fact a loop, if it is a loop, every time it loops, it's going to toggle, it's going to activate the clip action that's in here. So right now it's loop, which just means the loop brace is going to turn on and off, the master loop. And so when I push this, you'll see this every 4 counts turns on and off. I'm not touching it, it's just doing it by itself every 4 beats. So this is something, loop sequence is something I use in a couple different Clyphx. You can kind of think of ways that you might use it. Again, I'm not going to try to sit here and give you guys tips on how you might use all these things, although there are a lot of useful things here. I just want to show you that there are a lot of ways to use this. The next example, this is example of how you can use 2 actions at once. And these aren't simultaneous in the sense of both are going to happen exactly at the same time. Sometimes you might do an action that the next action is dependent on, and so they have to be in a certain order. This is not one of those actions. It just happens to be, I'm going to turn the mute on for track 2, and it's going to, well, you'll see what it does here. Change this. Okay, so as I push play here, it first turned this track to be muted on. If it's off, you'll see it turns on when I launch that clip. So the mute gets turned on, and then it's going to shift to the next MIDI input. And so that you have these lined up. If it's on Akai Max 49 MIDI, it's going to shift to Clyphx Pro input. And so you'll notice that when I push play, that it just shifts down. So that's a useful thing. The little caret, the in caret, isn't so useful, but you can actually put the name of the input device you want to use there. So if you want to be sure that your input is coming from a certain place, that's something. And again, this is just sort of an example of how you can control everything in Ableton, almost everything, but everything with Clyphx to do a lot of stuff that you might be thinking as a performer, I need to remember this. Don't do that. Just perform. Just be a performer. Yeah.
I think that's like literally one of my favorite things I've seen you do so far. That's really cool. I can think of a lot of different ways to use that. I mean, one being is like, rather than having, say, 2 different tracks and muting and unmuting them, and they're running third-party plugins for live performance.
Yeah.
You can save DSP by just having it switch the inputs of the MIDI rather than for that track, rather than having duplicate tracks of tons of plugins that's hurting your computer.
Totally. Yeah, I've made it's kind of in the middle stages of development. I made a template that was kind of a Max for Live device that did this, but it's the same principle. You can do it with Clyphx as well. But almost like in MainStage, I know a lot of keyboardists who use MainStage because of the easy switching and easy way to manage your CPU. But I love there's some ways to do that in Ableton that are I think superior because it doesn't crash as much. But I like to perform with Ableton, and so I've used Clyphx to kind of mimic some of my favorite features from other software as well. So
yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to jump to this next thing, and then what time is it? 7:30. We'll skip ahead to some pretty cool tricks in a second. So this is an example of multiple actions and a new action called p-seq. This is play sequence. So instead of loop sequence, this gets activated whenever I play the clip, and so it's going to step through, if I'm remembering correctly, it's going to step through my actions according to when I play this. So loop on is going to turn on my loop brace, and that's all it's going to do. It's not going to mess with any of these other actions. But then the next time I push play on this clip, it's going to jump to the next action, loop off, and that's going to turn our loop brace off. Not going to do anything else. And then the third time I push play here, it's going to set the volume of track 3 to 0, and then it's going to go back up. So as I play this, you see the loop brace turned on. I'll play it again. Loop brace is off. I'll play it a third time. Our volume got set down to 0, and then a fourth time it set the volume to 108. And this is interesting to note because there is no Clyphx action for volume 100% or anything like that. There is. It's 127. But then it ends up being volume looks like that. And so because of the way MIDI works and all of that stuff, it sets this to be 108 is unity gain, which is a weird thing. One of those little quirks that you have to learn if you're doing Max for Live programming, or if you're doing anything in Clyphx that needs an exact value. Sometimes it needs to be something like that. So let's switch over to arrangement view. I've already shown you the selection locator thing. I want to show you a couple other unique things that I use all the time. We talked about the set stop thing. Okay, so this is a use case would be vamping for a band, and if you've done playback, you've probably done something here where the music director says, "Hey, I want to vamp on this, and I don't know how long it's going to be, but it might be at least 3 minutes. Somebody might need to use the restroom during this vamp, so we need to have it be a long time, but it might be just 4 bars." So if you've ever been in a situation like that, usually the solution is to copy and paste 3 minutes into your Ableton session just in case you need it. And it could be useful. I think it's valuable, but for me, I like to just set up a simple vamp. It's one so simple that I can jump out of it on any bar, and the band knows where we are. And so what I will do is